Hello, Judith.
Hello.
Thank you for accepting my invitation. You are a psychotherapist and a spiritual teacher. You have developed the realization process. It's an embodied approach to non-dual realization. And you are the author of several books, Trauma and the Unbound Body, Belonging Here, The Intimate Life, The Enlightenment Process, and The Empathic Ground. And recently you released a new book, The Fullness of the Ground, a guide to embodied awakening. And for my first question, can you share your spiritual journey and how you came to understand and share non-duality?
Yeah. So of course, it's been even so far a long life, and it's kind of mysterious how one gets to be where one is. Many events that seem random, that when you look back, you realize it's been a path, one thing really leading to another. I think the real turning point for me was when I was in my 20s. I injured my back quite badly. I had been a professional dancer even since I was a child. So I really thought that was all that life was. And so when I lost it, and I had to have surgery on my back, it was really quite difficult. And I was no longer able to dance. So I was really in despair over that. I lay on the floor of what we call a loft in Manhattan, in New York City. I lived in a dance studio, as we could do in those days. It was not very expensive. And I lay on the floor of my dance studio and just opened myself for healing. I had been to many different kinds of healers, and no one was able to help. They fused my spine. So they fused it in the off-center position. Really, I could just barely sit and talk, or walk in a straight line. And of course, I had been extremely agile, a very highly trained dancer. So it was a huge change. I lay on the floor and just open to healing, and began to experience some very interesting things. Energy moving through me and actually pulling me into alignment when all I was doing was just lying there. At the same time, I had people coming to my loft to take dance classes with me, because that's how I earned a living. And of course, I couldn't teach them dancing, but I began to teach them these very subtle attunements. And that is what, over the years, became the realization process. Now, how it became non-duality, that's really quite mysterious, but I have always, even since a young child, I felt something extremely subtle in the air. And I was brought up in a very strict atheist background. Religion, God, those were just total fantasies for stupid people. So I had to really be on my own in terms of understanding or searching for this, what this was. I was very intrigued by it. It seemed important to me. And then when I became a professional dancer, I used to attune right to that subtle space, because it would help me perform. It would help me communicate to the audience and so forth. And then when I injured myself, I lost that. And so along with the loss of physical agility was the loss of that spiritual connection. And that was really a huge loss, and sent me on really sent me on an urgent path to find what that was. And that, of course, led very gradually, eventually, to Asian spiritual traditions, where they've known about that subtle level for a very long time.
And what does non-duality mean to you, and how does it differ maybe from other perspective or definitions?
Yes. So of course that's a very sophisticated question. As you know, and some of the listeners may know, there are many different perspectives on what non-duality is, many different teachings of it. The Tibetan Buddhists have very conveniently categorized two main lines, two main perspectives on non-duality. And that was helpful for me. It was helpful for me to understand why what I was experiencing as oneness was different from what some teachers were teaching. And so they categorize it as shentang and rangtang, empty of other, meaning just you get to this kind of clear space that pervades everything, that co-arises with the material world and all of experience, and rangtang, which is empty of itself, where there's really no ground, nothing there but this constantly changing flux of experience. So the ground, that's what interested me, because that's what fit my experience. I'd already had some experience of it, and I thought, oh, that's it. So that brought me into, living in a Zen monastery and so forth. Having, we actually live in Woodstock, New York, which is near one of the main centers of Tibetan Buddhism in America, and also to India, to Advaita Vedanta and so forth. So I began to look more and more deeply into, and there again, even amongst those different spiritual traditions, there are different attitudes and different perspectives, different ways of explaining the experience. But interestingly enough, if you put aside the philosophy and the metaphysics, and you just look at the description of the experience, you see it is really quite recognizably similar in all of these teachings. And so I just began to describe it the best I could to the people who came to work with me.
And on the title of the new book, the title is The Fullness of the Ground, a guide to embodied awakening. So can we unpack a little bit this title, because it seems that like there's a lot in this title. First, what is this ground that is full?
Yeah. So in my experience, and so of course in the realization process, the ground is what we can experience as an undivided consciousness. I call it fundamental consciousness in the realization process. But if you look at Hindu teachings and Buddhist teachings, you'll find other names for what seem to be the same experience. An undivided, very, very subtle consciousness, so subtle that it pervades all of the movement of experience. So fundamental consciousness, and we can uncover it. It's not, this is, it's a mystery what it is. I have no idea what it is. And the traditions differ on what it is metaphysically. But as an experience, it's not that out of reach. Anyone who's interested in it can uncover it in themselves, and then we experience it pervading our body. So it feels like the ground of our own being, right? It feels like, oh, this is me, finally. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a this, I'm not a that. This is what I am, this ground. That's the feeling of it. So it feels, we can say, authentic, it feels real. And it also feels it's uncreated, which is very interesting, because as living in our postmodern world, we know that we don't create experience necessarily, but we certainly interpret it and form it. But this is something we uncover in ourselves and seems to be the same, and we can only say seems to be the same experience in everyone who uncovers it. So we experience it pervading our body, and at the same time, we experience it pervading the world around us, other people, furniture, everything. So that everything appears to be made of this very subtle, undivided consciousness. It's disentangled because it's not fragmented. It's continuous through everything, and it's extremely subtle. So once again, it feels like, oh, we're finally seeing life pretty much as it is. There again, we don't want to get into what we call, naive realisms, but it's still our own senses and so forth. But it feels like it's been cleaned away, unveiled as much as we can get to. So pervading both our own body and our environment, it gives us an actual experience of oneness. So that to me is what non-duality is that actual experience of oneness, self-other oneness. But interestingly enough, and this is where I differ even from some of the Shentang teachings, it doesn't eradicate who we are. In fact, it uncovers the human qualities in our being because it pervades our whole body. It uncovers an actual feeling of love, of power, of the feel of our intelligence. It kind of matures our own individual humanness. And it also doesn't eradicate our individual quirks and so forth. It certainly doesn't erase our memory of our upbringing or our culture, all of that. But it is a sense of unmodified ground.
It seems like it's a way to prevent spiritual bypassing because it's all inclusive.
That's right. Yeah, not only that, it's all inclusive. So we get to know ourselves pretty deeply, for good or bad, Of course, there's nothing bad, but it does give us a sense of all of where we've protected ourselves and all of the way we've compensated for those protections and so forth. Gives us a sense of what our motivations are in our behavior and so forth. So very keen introspective base, introspective perspective. But it also enables us to let go of psychological holding patterns and the way that we have protected ourselves from abrasive events in our lives, especially as children, the way we've constricted the actual instrument of our experience, our body, our love, our power, our sexuality, our intelligence, our voice, the way we've constricted ourselves because we keep in the realization process, we open to fundamental consciousness by inhabiting the body and letting go from within the whole body. So those areas that we've constricted, we can't easily let go. So we're like, oh, look at that. There's this place that I'm still holding. So it becomes a kind of self-diagnostic, we can say, where to do the psychological work exactly in order to more fully inhabit our body, to make more full contact with ourselves, and as a result, to open more completely to fundamental consciousness. Here's a place I also differ with some of the other non-dual teachers, where they say, there's just, you just get there and that's it, and boom. In the realization process, what I teach, because it's been my experience, is that, in fact, there is a very definitive moment when we get from that kind of fragmented self-other experience to this plane of oneness, this dimension of oneness. And then there's a period of getting there and losing it, getting there and losing it. And then there's what we call stabilizing there. So we're always there. But even once we've stabilized there, we can continue to open to it. So it's not like a one-shot thing and boom, you're, enlightened. No, it's a gradual opening to that basic ground of our own being and the way we experience the world.
So it's really a process, a gradual opening, and in your method, I think that it's very organized. There's steps. Can you describe a little bit what are the steps, the main one, and if it's for everyone?
Okay, so two questions. Well, there's not really steps in terms of levels. There's practices. That's what the realization process is. It's just a series of attunement practices. But we do those practices over and over, and no matter how advanced we become, even after we stabilize there, we can keep doing the same practices. There's a subtle core of the body that we keep opening. There's the practice of inhabiting the body and letting go from deep within the whole body. That we can really keep doing it. I think we can keep doing it our whole life. At the beginning of the path, we always practice more vigorously. That says it should be. We do. When I was young, I used to sit like hours and hours. Oh, I certainly don't do that anymore. But there is a sense that it just keeps going. So I wouldn't say that there are levels. Now, whether it's for everyone, I would say it's for everyone who's interested in it. Yeah. If you think, oh yeah, that's what I want to experience myself as fundamental consciousness, then you're, 3/4 of the way there. And then it's for you. If you're like, what is the point of that? Then no, then you should do something else. Yeah.
And can you maybe show us an experiment or guide a little meditation to just so we can experiment your process?
Yes. There's two main practices. The first one is quite long, too long for this format. It takes about 35 minutes in itself. And the second one is much shorter, which I can do, which is the core breath. So what I will do now is an extremely shortened version of that first very long practice, extremely shortened. If it interests you, I'm talking to the people who are watching or listening to this, then of course it's important to do all the steps of the practice. But for now, we'll just do a very shortened version and then the core breath. Now, what's really important in terms of entering into fundamental consciousness in this way, by letting go from deep within the interior space of the body, right? The internal space of the body, which means making contact all the way through the internal space of the body. What's really important in that is that we can feel the difference between being aware of the body and living within it. So I'm going to start with a very brief practice for helping you in case some of the people listening have not experienced that difference, how you can get to that. So come sit up. Rest your hands in your lap. And take a moment to become aware of your hands. Now, in becoming aware of your hands, you may notice things like how warm or cold they are, or how tense or how relaxed. But you may also notice that you're experiencing your hands from outside of them, probably from above them. Now, enter into your hands so that you feel that you're actually living within them. Right? That you're present and alive within your hands. So in this first practice that we do, we practice that inhabiting of the body all the way through it, but we're going to do just this very short version. You can do this eyes open or closed, okay? Whatever is most comfortable for you. We start with just breathing. Calm, smooth, even breath. That's really just to find yourself present where you are, that you're breathing the air in your own environment right there, that you're relaxed enough, that the breath is calm. Now come down into your feet in the same way that we just entered into the hands. Enter into your feet. Make deep contact with yourself within your feet. Each time you do this practice, if you found yourself repeating it, you would find that you could make a little more internal contact with yourself. Now let your breath adjust to you being that far down in your body, to you being in your feet, so that when you inhale, it does not lift you up away from your feet. Right? You can stay in your feet as you breathe. And now come on into your whole body, including your feet. So that means making contact everywhere in your body at once. And that's what we take 35 minutes to do usually. Right? But there you are. Take a moment, if you can, to experience your whole being at once within your body. Find the space outside your body, the space in your environment. And now, if you can, feel that the space inside and outside your body is the same continuous space. Right? Fundamental consciousness, experience the space, pervading you inside and out. So you're still in your body, but you're permeable in that way. Space inside and outside is the same. Let yourself experience that the space that pervades you pervades your whole environment without moving at all from within your body. And you're still breathing, right? Evenly, calmly. And now we're going to go into the core breath. Okay? The core breath, we find a point in the innermost core of your head. Right? So deep in your head. Just by being in this head center, it enters you into your internal wholeness. So it gives you access everywhere in your body without you leaving it all from that head center. Right? It's these points we're going to be tuning to are portals, they're doorways into the internal space of the whole body. Bring your breath into your head center and back out again. So right away, the breath needs to be a little more subtle, maybe than the way you usually breathe. Let it go right through your head to that head center, and then the exhale releases, goes wherever it goes. Now initiate the breath from within your head center, as if you had air there, right in that little point in the core of your head that you could breathe. It's so subtle, this breath, it's almost a thought, but it is a breath. But even before you feel it move in your nose and your lungs, which you will, see if you can feel it move within your head center on both the inhale and the exhale. As you breathe within your head center, you may feel a very gentle resonance all the way down through the innermost core of your body, all the way to the base of your torso, just by breathing within the head center. This core of ourselves is even deeper than the midline of the body. Deep, deep, deep back, towards the back of ourselves. Now find your heart center, also known as the heart chakra. Heart center deep in the center of your chest. So center of your chest, but as deeply inward as you can focus, even deeper than the midline of the body. You can leave go your awareness of the head center. You're just in the heart center. Just by being in your heart center, it enters you into your wholeness. Same thing, right? Because you access everywhere in your internal being at once. Right? Just by being in the heart center. Now initiate the breath, right? That thought breath, right? So subtle within the heart center. Right? As if you had air now within the heart center that you could breathe. On both the inhale and the exhale. Feeling the resonance through your whole core just by breathing within the heart center. It might help you if this kind of practice is new to you, to imagine that someone you care for has their hand on your back, right behind your heart center, right, which is the center of the chest, deep in the core of the body. So on your back, and that you find their hand, find their fingertip, right, because it's just a little point. And take the breath right there where their fingertip is. Right? So that's how deep in it is, almost to the back. Feeling that resonance through your whole core now, just by breathing within the heart center. Right? Almost a thought. Okay, if you've been imagining a hand there, dissolve the image, right? And just taking the breath there. Now find your pelvic center. So, center of your pelvis, but deep in the core of your body. Again, focusing inwardly as deeply as you can. Just by being in your pelvic center, it enters you into your wholeness. Gives you access everywhere in your being at once. Initiate the breath within the pelvic center in the same way. Very fine, thin breath. This is a practice, right? So these experiences, these subtle experiences get easier and easier as you practice. Feeling the resonance through your whole core just by breathing within the pelvic center. Now we're going to find all 3 points at the same time. Find your head center again, innermost core of your head. Find your head center and your heart center at the same time. Add in the pelvic center. Now, if this work is new to you, this kind of work, you may find you can only do 2 points at once. With practice, you'll be able to add in the third. Right? But if you can, head center, heart center, and pelvic center, all at the same time. Just by being in those 3 points, it enters you into your wholeness. Initiate the breath from all 3 points, or 2 if that's what you're doing. Feeling that gentle vibration now everywhere in your body, not just in the core, but everywhere in the internal space of your body, just by breathing in those 3 points. If your eyes are closed, open them. See if you can find those 3 points again with the eyes open. Head center, heart center, and pelvic center with your eyes open. Take a moment to experience your room from that deep place in yourself. Initiate the breath from within all 3 points. Feeling that resonance, that vibration everywhere in your body at once. Now, find that space again that pervades you and your whole environment. The stillness, right? Fundamental consciousness. Experience the stillness, whereas this vibration, subtle breath, core breath, is experienced as subtle movement. And when we actually realize ourselves as fundamental consciousness, that's how we experience ourselves in the world all the time. Stillness pervading all of the movement of life. So see if you can, right? Stillness pervades you and your whole environment, and at the same time, breathing this, feeling this subtle vibration everywhere in your body. And because of that stillness, actually the movement of life moves even more freely, even more deeply. So rather than it becoming some kind of zombie-like state, it's the opposite, right? We feel our emotions moving more and more deeply, our thoughts more freely, get the creativity in that way, right? Our sensations moving more freely, right? So it's a way we can let go of ourselves, right? So just try that on. It's the last thing we'll do. Just try that on. As that pervasive space, we can let go of our habitual grip on ourself in the room. Right? As that pervasive space. And very important, of course, not to be gripping onto the space, right? Right? So we attune to it and then we let go. That's why it's a practice, right? It's not something that we attune to and hold on to. Practice, let go of the practice, come back to it the next day, like that.
Oh, wonderful. You talk about practice. This practice, is it needed to have a teacher, you, for example, or someone who's trained by in your system? Or can someone just learn with your books? Or what's the best way to experiment this method?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure there is a best way. It would certainly be easy enough to sort of skip parts of ourselves and so forth if we do it on our own. But at the same time, it gives you a lot of room and time to explore the practice if you do it on your own. Now, if you do it with a teacher, by the way, there's a whole list of senior teachers listed on my website, realizationprocess.org. Find a whole list of senior teachers and also of classes that I teach and that the certified trained teachers teach. So I think it's good once in a while, if you can, if it really interests you, to take a class or work with a teacher so that they lead you through it and watch what you're doing. You might be finding the core a little to the left or the right and so forth. So the teachers are trained to see that. And also some people do better with the support of a group. So for that, the classes are good. The series of the workshops. We teach teacher trainings, teacher certification trainings. Those are also on the website. So if the work really interests you, but it has to be, you have to have done it yourself for a little bit. It has to be something that really interests you before you decide to teach it. But if you want to teach it, then we also do quite a lot of that, teaching you how to look, how to teach people get to these very subtle attunements.
And to go a little back on the practice and on the core, it reminds me of I come from a Buddhist path, and with some tantric practices like tumo, or there's some preparatory exercises like the empty body before doing tumo, and it's very your approach seems more even more embodied, because in the Buddhist tradition there is a lot of visualization. It's with the mind, and right. Here it's really you inhabit your body, so it's more concrete, or it's more fuller, maybe.
Yes, it's definitely, you're exactly right. That is the difference. We're not working so much with the imagination at all. We're working to actually get to that experience, which they do, of course, in Buddhism, but there are many, many steps. So yes, we go right to the experience here of that. Yeah.
Before we end this interview, have you got some events or classes, or I don't know, retreats that you will have in the next month?
Not the next month. The next series that I'm teaching is in February, and it's based on the new book, The Fullness of the Ground. And that's a series, I think it's 4 classes. It's all on my website. So if you go there, the schedule of events page. That's the next series I'm doing, and everyone is welcome to that. It's it's both an introduction and also can help people go deeper if you've been doing this or something like it for a while.
Okay. Thank you very much for this very practical, pragmatic, and very concrete sharing. And I will upload the video in 3 or 4 weeks because I have to do the translation in French. So I'm not so fast. So, but I really want to express my gratitude. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
And have a nice afternoon for you, maybe, I think.
Thank you. Yes, have a nice evening.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah.